started on EOSC. So the vision, imagine a web of fair data and services. And I will say this now, that fair means findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. So we get it out of the way, right? Okay, so a web of fair data and services, a trusted virtual environment to support open science based on key core functionalities, making e-infrastructures and service accessible to researchers across discipline and through Europe. Now, this is actually the vision, but what does it mean for the researchers? The researchers can get help to store, process, analyze, and even reuse research outputs within and across disciplines and borders. Well, that sounds like a pretty nice vision, doesn't it? As a researcher, you will feel no boundaries and you will have access to all the data that you need. So let's see, what does the European Science Cloud then mean for you? Here's an example, all right? Now, if you're a researcher and you wonder, I wonder how something. I wasn't creative enough to come up with a question, but I'm sure many of the researchers across Europe are. Then you can go to your usual suspects of data, bioimaging, gene expression, optics, sensors, because why not? And let me drop in some archaeology. Now, if you want data that is diverse from all of these sources, and then you put it in some sort of compute to do your analysis for the questions that you want answered. Well, actually, not just that sort of a compute, probably something connected to the cloud, right? And then you'll come up with an answer. Oh, now we know. So the basic idea is to make the lives of researchers easy. And what you will realize is it's all connected. That is the main idea of the European Open Science Cloud, at least from a researcher's point of view. So in general, the European Open Science Cloud aims to be a digital infrastructure where you can actually share the infrastructure, right? You also are able to not just share the infrastructure that you need to work with, but also the data that comes usually from the disciplinary domains, like the life sciences or the social sciences or the electron and neutron sciences, right? So all that data, the software, the practices, and the knowledge, how that goes in to promote open science in an interoperable way. That is also an important component, the open science component of the EOSC. And this is not it. To enable a lot of this, what you need to have is European policy that will allow the development of such infrastructure and such practices, because it's easy to write down a lot of these things, but when it comes to implementation, policy and funding are the things that actually support development of these resources. So that is the big aim of the European Open Science Cloud. Of course, are we there yet? Well, let's see. Let's see where we are. Well, currently, the European Open Science Cloud is trying to form a federation, which will consist of multiple nodes, so to say, which will be interconnected, and they can collaborate in a way to share scientific data, knowledge, resources across thematic and geographical boundaries. So this actually enables, as a researcher, to be able to take very diverse data and to be able to use general compute, often which is available at national levels, in order to get answers to your interesting questions that you have. Now, these are just lots of logos. You don't have to go much into details. Maybe you see your favorites there, and by no means do I talk about Euro-BioImaging. Maybe. So we are all working together hard with the European Commission in order to make these things a reality. Now, can I EOSC already? That's also an excellent question. This is something where we are trying to do things while we are working on them. However, if you want to get a flavor of what it can look like, what you can follow is the link to the EOSC EU node. So this is an example node that currently includes following services, like the file sync and share, interactive notebooks, you have large file transfer, virtual machines, cloud container platforms, as well as bulk data transfer. Here is a QR code for you to access the EOSC EU node. And this material. So here, if you go in, please feel free to go in and log in. It'll be interesting because then you will realize the importance and the idea behind such an endeavor. Because you will, in principle, be able to use your own institutional, well, at least the European ones so far, your institutional affiliations, your institutional logins in order to access this. In principle, depending on your status as a researcher or somebody working in a facility, depending on what your institution defines you in a virtual fashion for your IT account, so to say, you will have some credits to play with which you can. So credits are basically EOSC money that you can. Give me 1 second. Yes. So credits are basically EOSC money that you can use to, let's say, use a European Dropbox, or you can have a Python notebook if you like. So these are some of the activities that you can engage with. The idea is that these are the generic functionalities, and eventually, like you saw in the previous slide, together with many different infrastructures, whether at national level or at thematic level, they want to come together in order to form these sort of nodes that can work together with each other, share services, share data, making research a very interesting things for our European researchers. All right. Oh, I did click somewhere else. Now, what about imaging data, right? Euro-BioImaging, I said it's Euro-BioImaging and the EOSC. All right, let's think about that. We have discussed already about the complexity of imaging data, right? The size, the format, the multimodality, security, ethical, and legal issues, and so on. So these kind of, some of them are common with other kinds of data. Some others are more specific for image data. So what we are trying to do at Euro-BioImaging is that we are working together with and towards the EOSC to make that a reality and to make sure that the interests of the imaging community are represented and heard when they think about such a common infrastructure on the European level. But does it mean something in practical terms? Can we already see something? To be fair, yes, because there has already been a lot of contribution towards towards enabling open science, having open data, services, and research data management practices through a lot of projects that eventually feed into the EOSC. So here are just examples of certain Horizon Europe projects that have been funded in the past that Euro-BioImaging has been part of, and some of them are over now, however, others are ongoing. One of the key ones that has enabled a lot of activities for the life sciences is the EOSC Life project, but then a lot of others, including EOSC Future and many other ongoing projects like AI for Life, Founding Guide, and Rescale, they will all, including UCAIM, they will feed into the EOSC, making the services that are relevant for the imaging scientists be a part of this common infrastructure. So these are the kind of outputs that we've had. So just to, I'm not going to list all of this because that is going to be a very long list, but just for you to have an idea, we are talking about infrastructure, especially and specifically for image data that is more suited for image data, standards to promote interoperability from image data to other data types, handling sensitive image data, the management and analysis, AI methods for image data analysis and management, as well as aspects like engagement with global community towards these aspects. Data reuse cases, which is one of the main reasons why we want to encourage people also to share their data for scientific integrity, as well as to enable reuse of data. There has been also a lot of work on developing training on research data management practices, as well as community formats and tools. I'm not going to be able to go into a lot of details of each of these projects, but I wanted to mention that there are these outputs that are already there, and they will hopefully be fed into this EOSC so that that becomes a reality for all researchers, but also for the imaging scientists.